What began as a routine conversation quietly shifted into an unexpected moment on live television. What happens when a routine conversation on live television takes an unexpected turn? Make sure to subscribe to Prime Voice and like and comment for more real talk show coverage. The segment began like many others on The View, with Jake Gyllenhaal joining the panel to promote an upcoming project. The cameras opened on the familiar set, with the hosts seated around the semicircular table, ready to engage with their guest. Sunny Hostin, known for her thoughtful yet direct style, started the conversation by bringing up a recent topic in the entertainment industry, a conversation surrounding celebrity accountability and public statements about social issues. It was framed as a general discussion, and initially, Gyllenhaal responded in his usual calm, measured manner. Sunny posed a question that invited Gyllenhaal's perspective on how public figures should approach controversial topics, particularly when their personal opinions are scrutinized on social media. She emphasized the role of responsibility, noting that fans and followers often look to celebrities for guidance or for cues about social behavior. At first, Gyllenhaal nodded and began addressing the question from a broad perspective, discussing the importance of context and the pressures public figures face when speaking on sensitive matters. The tone at this point was professional, but layered with the subtle tension that often comes from discussing public accountability. Sunny, leaning forward slightly and maintaining steady eye contact, pressed on with follow-up questions. She asked if he believed that staying silent on certain issues could be considered a form of complicity. Gyllenhaal paused for a moment, choosing his words carefully, emphasizing that while staying silent can be interpreted in various ways, context and intention are important factors to consider. It was during this moment that the first signs of disagreement emerged. Sunny, maintaining her measured yet firm approach, gently challenged his viewpoint, suggesting that in some cases, silence from public figures might send a message regardless of intent. She referenced recent examples from the entertainment world, pointing out situations where fans and critics interpreted an action as endorsement or disregard for social concerns. The studio audience remained attentive, picking up on the subtle tension as the conversation began to shift from a general discussion to a more pointed dialogue. Gyllenhaal responded thoughtfully, acknowledging the points she raised, but he began to clarify that public figures must navigate a complex landscape. He noted that messaging could easily be misconstrued, and that sometimes what is seen as silence might actually reflect personal reflection or strategic communication. His tone was calm, his hands lightly resting on the table, though there was a noticeable tightening in his expression as he spoke. The audience reacted with quiet murmurs, sensing the delicate balance of a polite disagreement unfolding live. Sunny did not back down. She reiterated her position, emphasizing the responsibility that comes with visibility and the influence celebrities have over their audience. Her voice remained calm, but there was an unmistakable firmness in her phrasing. She asked directly whether, in situations where a public figure chooses not to speak, there is an ethical obligation to consider the potential impact of that silence. At this point, Gyllenhaal leaned back slightly, tilting his head, signaling that he wanted to frame his answer carefully. The hosts around the table began to interject occasionally, with Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar offering small, supportive comments to maintain the flow of conversation while allowing the disagreement to develop naturally. The atmosphere was still respectful, but the pacing had shifted. The calm back and forth had turned into a more analytical exchange, each side presenting viewpoints and counterpoints with measured intensity. The audience could feel the difference, with subtle tension as viewers witnessed a genuine debate taking shape rather than a rehearsed or promotional interview. Gyllenhaal then provided a nuanced example, describing a situation in which a celebrity's silence was interpreted in multiple ways depending on the observer's perspective. He emphasized the importance of understanding that public perception is not always a reflection of intent. Sunny listened intently, nodding occasionally, but clearly preparing to respond with her own perspective. She highlighted that, while intent matters, the impact of a public figure's choices cannot be dismissed, and that accountability includes anticipating how statements, or the absence of statements, might be received. By the end of this initial exchange, the tension had grown, but it remained grounded in professional dialogue. The cameras occasionally shifted focus to the audience, capturing the attentive expressions of the studio guests, who were clearly intrigued by the thoughtful, pointed discussion. The dynamic between Gyllenhaal and Sunny had evolved from polite conversation to a subtle debate, one that illustrated the challenges of navigating complex topics in real time on live television. As the segment continued, viewers could sense that this was more than a standard interview. It was an unfolding exploration of responsibility, perception, and public communication. Gyllenhaal maintained his composure throughout, occasionally gesturing with his hands to underscore a point, while Sunny remained deliberate and measured, articulating her perspective clearly and consistently. The moment had set the stage for what would become a memorable exchange, one that demonstrated how live talk shows can balance civility with the honest airing of differing viewpoints. The conversation had started casually, but by the first few minutes, it was evident that both participant and host were committed to engaging with each other sincerely, without sensationalism, yet with an intensity that held the audience's attention. As the conversation moved forward, Sunny Hostin pressed further, asking Gyllenhaal about specific instances in which celebrities had faced backlash for remaining silent on controversial issues. She referenced recent headlines and social media reactions, framing the question around accountability and moral responsibility. Gyllenhaal listened carefully, his expression thoughtful, before responding with a measured explanation. He acknowledged the public's interest in celebrity opinions, but emphasized that personal reflection and context should not be overlooked. Sunny, maintaining her composed demeanor, countered by pointing out that regardless of intention, the perception of silence could be damaging or misleading. She explained that fans often look to public figures for cues on social and political matters, and that choosing not to speak could be interpreted as tacit approval. Gyllenhaal nodded, but he offered a perspective rooted in nuance, explaining that not every situation is clear-cut and that a single statement, or lack thereof, cannot encompass the entirety of a person's values or beliefs. The exchange grew slightly more tense as Sunny continued to explore the implications of celebrity influence. She asked whether Gyllenhaal felt a moral obligation to respond in situations where public silence could be harmful. His answer was careful and deliberate. He acknowledged that there are circumstances where speaking out is important, but emphasized the complexity of navigating public perception, particularly in an era dominated by social media. He described the challenge of balancing personal convictions with public expectations, noting that misinterpretation is always possible. Throughout this dialogue, the hosts interjected occasionally, with Joy Behar and Whoopi Goldberg providing context or clarification without taking sides. Their comments served to keep the conversation flowing and offered moments of levity or grounding in contrast to the more serious points being raised. The audience watched attentively, responding with nods and quiet murmurs, reflecting the increasing intensity of the discussion. Sunny then shifted slightly, focusing on the ethical dimensions of influence. She asked Gyllenhaal whether he believed that public figures have a duty to anticipate the consequences of their inaction. He responded thoughtfully, agreeing that influence comes with responsibility, but reiterating that context, personal reflection, and the timing of statements all play critical roles in how actions, or inactions, are perceived. His tone remained calm, and he carefully avoided appearing defensive, which maintained the professional nature of the exchange while allowing the disagreement to remain visible. The conversation continued with examples from both the entertainment world and broader social issues. Sunny referenced high-profile incidents where celebrity silence had drawn criticism, emphasizing that inaction could carry weight regardless of intent. Gyllenhaal countered with examples in which careful consideration before speaking led to more meaningful and accurate communication, noting that rushed statements could sometimes cause unintended harm. This back and forth illustrated the tension between intent and perception, a dynamic that both hosts and guests navigated carefully. As the dialogue unfolded, subtle changes in body language became noticeable. Sunny leaned forward slightly when emphasizing her points, her eyes steady and her tone deliberate. Gyllenhaal maintained measured gestures, occasionally clasping his hands or tilting his head as he considered his responses. The audience could sense the careful balance being struck, observing a real-time negotiation of differing perspectives without overt confrontation. The discussion also included moments where the panel collectively reflected on the broader cultural context. Whoopi offered insight on the challenges of maintaining authenticity under public scrutiny, while Joy provided historical context on celebrity influence over time. These contributions helped frame the debate, situating the disagreement between Gyllenhaal and Sunny within a larger, more thoughtful conversation about accountability and communication. By the midpoint of the segment, the conversation had settled into a rhythm of respectful disagreement. Sunny presented pointed questions, Gyllenhaal responded with nuance, and the panel moderated and contextualized without interrupting the natural flow. The audience remained engaged, reacting subtly to shifts in tone, pacing, and body language, as the live nature of the discussion added weight to every statement. Despite the rising tension, both Gyllenhaal and Sunny maintained professionalism. There was no escalation into argument or hostility, but the seriousness of the exchange created a palpable intensity. It became clear that this segment would be remembered not for conflict, but for the careful, real-time negotiation of ideas and principles, demonstrating how daytime talk shows can handle meaningful disagreements responsibly and thoughtfully. As the segment progressed toward the latter half of the discussion, viewers could sense that the conversation was moving toward resolution. Both parties had expressed their perspectives clearly, and while differences remained, the tone shifted toward understanding and acknowledgement of each other's points. The careful pacing, combined with measured responses and thoughtful interjections from the hosts, created a conversation that was compelling, grounded, and authentic, reflecting the realities of live television dialogue. Sunny Hostin then guided the conversation toward a more specific scenario, asking Gyllenhaal how he would respond if faced with a situation in which a statement, or the lack of one, could significantly influence public opinion on a sensitive social matter. She framed the question carefully, emphasizing that this was not hypothetical, but reflective of the real-world scrutiny celebrities encounter daily. Gyllenhaal listened attentively, briefly pausing before offering a detailed response. He spoke about the importance of deliberate communication, explaining that thoughtfulness can often outweigh immediacy in determining how messages are received. Sunny pressed further, suggesting that even careful deliberation cannot erase the impact of silence, particularly when audiences look for leadership or guidance in moments of public controversy. She referenced specific instances in recent news where celebrities' inaction had sparked debate, highlighting the consequences of perceived indifference. Gyllenhaal responded by acknowledging the concern, stating that while public expectation is an important factor, each individual must also navigate personal reflection, intent, and the nuance of complex situations. The conversation naturally drew input from other panelists. Joy Behar interjected with an observation about the difference between public performance and private convictions, noting that the audience often conflates visibility with endorsement. Whoopi Goldberg added that the rapid pace of news cycles and social media commentary can amplify misinterpretation, creating pressure on celebrities to respond immediately, sometimes before fully understanding the situation. These contributions contextualize the disagreement, framing it as a broader discussion about perception, influence, and responsibility in the public eye. Sunny, returning the focus to Gyllenhaal, asked if he believed there is ever a point at which staying silent becomes ethically questionable, even with thoughtful intent. Gyllenhaal acknowledged that there are indeed situations that require action or a statement, but he reiterated that intent and context matter, emphasizing that complex circumstances cannot always be addressed with simple or immediate responses. His tone remained calm and measured, projecting thoughtfulness rather than defensiveness, which allowed the conversation to remain professional while maintaining its tension. Throughout the segment, the audience remained engaged, responding with quiet attentiveness and occasional murmurs of agreement or surprise. The cameras captured subtle reactions. Some leaned forward, some nodded slowly, reflecting the audience's absorption in the dialogue. Sunny's persistence and Gyllenhaal's careful articulation created a dynamic that was intellectually engaging and emotionally resonant without becoming confrontational. As the discussion developed, Sunny shifted slightly to address the responsibility of influence beyond social issues, touching on celebrity involvement in charitable initiatives, advocacy, and community engagement. She asked Gyllenhaal whether he believed public figures should consider the broader societal impact of all their actions, not just their statements. Gyllenhaal responded affirmatively, noting that influence is multifaceted and that actions often speak louder than words. He explained that engagement in meaningful initiatives can sometimes communicate principles more effectively than verbal statements alone. Sunny nodded but pressed on, emphasizing that visibility amplifies responsibility. She argued that when an individual with a public platform remains silent on pressing matters, it can inadvertently signal complacency or indifference. Gyllenhaal acknowledged the point, but he countered by emphasizing the difficulty of satisfying all audiences simultaneously, noting that well-intentioned silence can still be misinterpreted despite the individual's awareness or care. The dialogue continued with both parties carefully illustrating their perspectives through examples and reasoning. Gyllenhaal used personal anecdotes from his career to explain the challenges of navigating public perception, while Sunny drew upon recent cultural events to highlight how absence of commentary can create powerful impressions. The tension remained subtle but present, shaped by respectful disagreement rather than overt confrontation. At one point, Sunny leaned forward, her voice calm but firm, asking if celebrities might consider proactive communication strategies to mitigate misunderstanding. Gyllenhaal responded with measured agreement, clarifying that thoughtful timing and context are critical, and that strategic communication must be balanced with authenticity. The audience reacted with quiet engagement, acknowledging the nuance of the exchange, as the discussion highlighted the complexity of public responsibility without dramatizing conflict. The panel continued to interject occasionally, offering context, support, and clarification. These contributions ensured that the conversation flowed naturally, allowing Gyllenhaal and Sunny to explore differing viewpoints while maintaining civility. The discussion highlighted the balance between intent and perception, illustrating how live talk shows can navigate nuanced debates without sacrificing clarity, authenticity, or audience engagement. By the end of this portion of the segment, the disagreement between Gyllenhaal and Sunny had been clearly established, yet it remained respectful and grounded. Both participants had articulated their positions thoughtfully, providing context, examples, and reasoning for their perspectives. The audience, both in the studio and watching from home, was left with a clear sense of the issue's complexity, understanding the subtleties of public responsibility and the interplay between silence, statement, and perception. The conversation set the stage for the next phase of the discussion, where the focus would shift toward reconciliation, acknowledgement of differing perspectives, and a deeper exploration of the personal and ethical considerations that drive public communication. The segment maintained its professional tone while sustaining interest, demonstrating the capacity of daytime talk shows to present serious, grounded debates in a manner that is both accessible and engaging. Sunny Hostin then steered the conversation toward the practical implications of celebrity influence, asking Gyllenhaal how he personally decides when to speak out and when to refrain. She framed the question around the responsibility that comes with visibility, emphasizing that public figures are often held accountable not only for what they say, but also for what they choose not to say. Gyllenhaal paused thoughtfully before responding, explaining that he carefully weighs each situation, considering both the potential impact of his words and the possible misinterpretation that could arise. Sunny acknowledged his approach but pressed further, noting that there are moments when silence, no matter how intentional, can unintentionally convey a message that may contradict a person's values. She asked whether he believed it is possible to remain entirely neutral in the public eye, or if choosing not to comment is inherently interpreted as taking a stance. Gyllenhaal responded with measured consideration, agreeing that complete neutrality is nearly impossible, but emphasizing that thoughtful communication, when done with integrity, can minimize misunderstanding. The panel interjected periodically, providing context and maintaining the rhythm of the discussion. Joy Behar offered insight on the historical expectations placed on celebrities, while Whoopi Goldberg highlighted the speed and intensity of modern social media reactions. Their input helped frame the disagreement between Sunny and Gyllenhaal as part of a larger conversation about influence, perception, and ethical responsibility, rather than a personal confrontation. Sunny then brought up a scenario in which a celebrity's silence had led to significant public criticism. She asked Gyllenhaal if, in hindsight, he felt there were instances in his own career where speaking out earlier might have been beneficial. Gyllenhaal acknowledged that while he strives to be thoughtful, there are inevitably moments where timing could have been handled differently. He clarified that learning from experience is a key part of navigating public life, and that mistakes or missteps are often opportunities for reflection rather than indicators of intent. The audience reacted with quiet attentiveness, reflecting the tension and seriousness of the exchange. The cameras occasionally captured subtle gestures, Sunny leaning forward to underscore her point, Gyllenhaal nodding as he considered his response, highlighting the dynamic interplay of verbal and nonverbal communication that defines live television dialogue. The discussion maintained a calm but intense energy, grounded in the principles of professionalism and mutual respect. Sunny shifted slightly, focusing on the ethical dimensions of influence. She asked whether Gyllenhaal believed public figures have an obligation to consider the broader societal impact of their choices beyond immediate visibility or public reaction. Gyllenhaal agreed that influence carries responsibility, explaining that actions often communicate as much as words. He emphasized that authenticity and thoughtful consideration are key to ensuring that public statements, or the decision to remain silent, align with personal and societal values. The conversation deepened as both sides explored the balance between intention and perception. Sunny highlighted how even well-meaning silence can be interpreted as complicity, while Gyllenhaal stressed that context, timing, and personal reflection are critical in determining whether a public response is appropriate. The exchange remained civil but increasingly pointed, illustrating the real-life complexity of navigating public scrutiny while maintaining personal integrity. As the discussion continued, the hosts provided intermittent context and clarification, ensuring that the conversation remained accessible to viewers. Whoopi Goldberg noted the difficulty of satisfying all audiences simultaneously, while Joy Behar offered historical perspective on the evolving expectations of celebrity conduct. These contributions helped frame the disagreement as an insightful exploration of responsibility and influence rather than a personal clash. Sunny then asked Gyllenhaal if he believed that public figures should proactively anticipate how their silence or statements might be interpreted. Gyllenhaal responded thoughtfully, agreeing that consideration of public perception is important, but reiterating that authenticity must remain central. He explained that attempts to preemptively manage interpretation can sometimes dilute the sincerity of a message, and that striking the right balance requires reflection, awareness, and discernment. The tension between the two perspectives became increasingly clear, but remained grounded in professional dialogue. Sunny's persistence in probing the ethical implications of silence contrasted with Gyllenhaal's measured focus on nuance and context. The exchange highlighted the challenges inherent in navigating public life, demonstrating the careful negotiation of ideas required when differing viewpoints are presented live on television. By the conclusion of this segment, the discussion had evolved into a thorough examination of public responsibility, perception, and the complexities of communication for individuals in the spotlight. The audience remained attentive, and the hosts skillfully guided the dialogue, allowing for meaningful engagement while maintaining a professional atmosphere. The segment had successfully conveyed the seriousness of the topic, balancing respectful disagreement with thoughtful reflection, and setting the stage for the final portion of the conversation where resolution and audience reflection would be addressed. As the segment approached its conclusion, Sunny Hostin guided the conversation toward reconciliation, asking Gyllenhaal how he personally integrates lessons learned from public perception into his ongoing decisions about speaking out. He responded with a calm, reflective tone, explaining that each experience informs future choices and that he strives to remain aware of the potential impact of his words without compromising authenticity. His explanation illustrated a balance between responsibility and personal integrity, highlighting the thoughtfulness required of public figures navigating complex social landscapes. Sunny acknowledged his perspective and noted that while differences of opinion remain, the discussion itself underscored the importance of dialogue. She emphasized that understanding the nuances of intent, impact, and timing is critical in evaluating the ethical responsibilities of visibility. Gyllenhaal agreed, recognizing that accountability exists alongside complexity and that navigating this terrain requires careful judgment. The exchange, while rooted in disagreement earlier, had shifted toward mutual recognition of the challenges faced by those in the public eye. The panel interjected briefly, providing context and perspective on how the discussion reflected broader societal conversations about celebrity influence. Joy Behar remarked on the evolving expectations placed upon public figures, while Whoopi Goldberg highlighted the increasing speed of social media commentary, which amplifies both statements and silence. These contributions framed the disagreement as a meaningful exploration rather than personal contention, reinforcing the educational and reflective nature of the segment. The studio audience responded with attentive nods and soft applause as the segment wrapped up, reflecting appreciation for the thoughtful discussion. There was a sense of closure, with both Sunny and Gyllenhaal expressing mutual respect, even while acknowledging that differing perspectives remain. The cameras lingered on Gyllenhaal's composed demeanor and Sunny's poised engagement, capturing the subtle satisfaction of a conversation that remained substantive and respectful throughout. Following the show, The segment quickly became a topic of conversation online. Viewers praised the professional handling of a nuanced disagreement, noting that the exchange offered insight into how celebrities navigate public responsibility while maintaining personal authenticity. Social media discussions focused on the balance between intent and perception, the ethical dimensions of silence, and the challenges of communicating in a highly scrutinized environment. Commentators highlighted the civility and thoughtfulness of both Gyllenhaal and Sunny, noting that the dialogue offered a model for constructive conversation even amidst disagreement. In post-show interviews and commentary, both Gyllenhaal and Sunny reflected on the exchange, emphasizing the value of dialogue over confrontation. Gyllenhaal noted that differing viewpoints can illuminate blind spots and encourage reflection, while Sunny highlighted the importance of maintaining accountability while respecting the complexities individuals face. These reflections reinforce the notion that daytime talk shows can provide a space for substantive, nuanced conversation without resorting to sensationalism. The segment ultimately ended on a tone of respectful acknowledgement. Both participants had clearly articulated their perspectives, and while consensus was not fully reached, the discussion provided clarity, context, and insight for the audience. The studio audience and viewers at home were left with a sense of the thoughtful, real-time negotiation required in live television dialogue, understanding both the challenges and responsibilities that come with public visibility. Share your opinion in the comments and subscribe to Prime Voice for more narration-based talk show stories.